One of the best guys you'll ever meet from Ada, Oklahoma. Give it up for David. Yeah!
Bless his heart. I keep in my spot. But I know the songs, I know the routine, I know the situation. You know, I mean, he could probably get anybody he would want out there to do it, but on the other side of the coin, then this person doesn't know how everything works.
You got to remember that a keyboard player is usually the glue on everything because it's the synth sound, which is the big wash that kind of holds everybody together. That thing that hits you, that's Gant.
There's some monster players in that band. It brings you up to a whole new level. People are prepared. They show up. They know their parts. You don't have to worry about somebody slacking. You know, attitudes, egos are kept at a check because it's just this all for one for all kind of attitude. When you've got 20,000 people screaming their fool heads off at you, you're drawing off that energy. That's, yeah.
Blame it all on his roots, which are planted firmly in Ada, Oklahoma. As an original and longtime member of the Garth Brooks touring band, Dave Gant has reached heights few musicians ever will, doing what he loves in front of millions of fans who love what he does. Chance meetings, lucky breaks, twists of fate, doesn't matter how you look at it. It happened and is still happening. A fluke? Maybe, but when you inspect the roads he's traveled, it couldn't have turned out any other way.
My folks both taught music. My dad was band director at East Central from 1957 to 82, and mother taught violin privately, so I've always been around music. I played trombone and band and viola, and my mother started me on viola, saying, if you play viola, that'll put you through college. And it kind of did. But my interest in playing in rock bands or that type of ensemble, of course, was like anybody else seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. And it was great because Mother goes, oh, David, I hope you don't do that. I goes, oh, no, Mother, I'll never do anything like that.
The Beatles!
February 9th, 1964, The Ed Sullivan Show. Beatlemania electrified the youth of Ada, Oklahoma, just as it did every kid in every neighborhood in every inner city, suburb, and cowtown across America. Girls, fame, money, and it could be done with your buddies in tow. Like every boy his age, Dave wanted it. The Beatles simply showed up with instructions and a treasure map.
You have to add after the Beatles, and you get more and more groups and acts. I mean, there was a period in Ada, probably in the mid-late 60s, when there was 20 or 30 bands. Every block had a band. They had a battle of the bands out at the Wintersmith Lodge, and there was, it's just, that was that era. Everybody, I can join a rock band, become rich and famous, so that was the big thing to do. So that was when I guess it was 7th, 8th grade. I had a big interest in playing in bands.
In addition to superior talent, what really set Dave apart early on was musical versatility. While many kids his age learned enough of one instrument to be dangerous and draw a little bit of fleeting attention, the steady influence of Dave's parents made sure that, first and foremost, music should be made for the sake of music. Anything beyond that, however tempting, is merely fluff. It begins and ends with the music you make. So for starters, Dave mastered more than one instrument.
So I played trombone, viola, and keyboards, which being a music major in college, across from viola over to violin, playing in bands. And I played brass instruments, and I've played keyboard since a kid. My dad was a great organ player, so I never really emulated him, but I was playing organ in bands.
His mother was a sensational string teacher here in Ada. And his dad, of course, band director for East Central for years, and also played in dance bands. And he was a great organist, and I'm sure all of that rubbed off on Dave and was part of his pedigree right there. So Mom and Dad had everything to do with it.
My dad was a huge influence. His ability to hear something and play it back at you, his ability to hear something and write it out was just phenomenal.
He knew when to showboat and when not to. I mean, he, knew when to, he's just playing accompaniment or background. And, his musicianship, he knew how to fit parts in really well.
Most Beatles-influenced local bands folded as quickly as they started when 99% plus of would-be rock stars realized they either couldn't play or weren't interested in working for it. Pretenders aside, the path was clear for Dave. a bona fide talent, to start something musically meaningful in Ada, which he did. The real players were still around, and they banded together.
You had Smiley Weaver, Smiley's guitar shop, where people could go down and hang out and stare at all the local gear and hear stories like that. That's probably had a lot to do with shaping my music career in Ada. I was probably 16 when I started playing bars around here. Our drummer was 21, so as long as you had some person in the band of age, they were responsible for you. He was pretty responsible too. Probably the first professional break was playing with Joe Pryor and the Black Lions, because Joe had a great band for years. Always had great players, we made great money. So that was probably my first professional gig, I would say, would be playing with Joe.
Dave was in Ada High School, like his senior year, and I had played with Dave's father years back, and I knew about Dave and his musicianship. So I asked him if he wanted to see if he wanted to play in the band, and we rehearsed and proved to be a real good player.
While Dave learned how to hold his own in a band in high school, gigs in and around Ada were limited, and they always would be. He wanted to continue his musical education in college, something his parents also wanted for him. Getting out of Ada for the first time introduced Dave to new styles, new players, new ideas, and new horizons. He embraced it like only a true musician could.
When I left here, I went to UCO, Edmond. We had a little band that played frat sorority parties. And probably the biggest gig up there was a group called New World Band in the mid-'70s. We worked on Southside Oklahoma City for 2 years solid. We ever had a week off. That was a good band. I learned a lot in that band because it was a real quality band.
Dave always was focused. In high school, he wanted to play. He didn't want to teach. He really had a focus. He was smart. He knew what he had to do in order to have the best chance of making it.
As his musical education continued both in the classroom and in smoky hotel lounges, Dave's reputation as a skilled, reliable multi-instrumentalist set him apart. It was obvious that Dave was dead serious about what he did, and that made him a desirable commodity to other ambitious artists. In 1978, while living in Norman, his ability to play fiddle and keys caught the attention of well-known troubadour Ray Wiley Hubbard, and he signed up for a tour as one of Hubbard's Cowboy Twinkies. It was a short gig, but would ignite his first true musical adventures outside of Oklahoma.
So that thing lasted maybe 6-8 months. We toured with Willie Nelson on the Stardust Tours, his warm-up band. And that blew up. I came back to Oklahoma City and worked with a couple of bands. But then I loaded up the station wagon and went to L.A. I got a job with a black show band called Something Special that was Soul Train dancers and singers, and went to Mexico for 10 weeks with, the only white guy in a black show band. It was a great band. It was a good band, good players. They had the guitar player from the Stylistics and drummer done stuff with Shalimar. So, I was able to audition and get that job. Then we go to Mexico on that tour. It was a mafia tour. I remember after about, I guess it was 6 or 8 weeks, we stopped getting paid. So the leader said, well, we're going to go get we were in Mexico City, said, we're going to get our visas, and we're going to fly out of here. So he got the visas, and we were getting ready to go to the airport, and they surrounded the hotel with mafia people. I thought, I'm dead. This is it. That's what I get, wide-eyed Ada boy going to L.A., now in Mexico with the black show band. That's what were you thinking? So the manager and this guy stood there and screamed at each other in Spanish for about 5 minutes. The next thing else says, we're okay, we're going to get paid. And the next day they paid me, caught up, and so we finished out the tour and flew home.
When Dave returned to Los Angeles, he found it tough to find a job. So he drifted north and fell in with a show band that played gigs in a hotel chain from Sacramento to Portland. But he knew L.A. was the place to be as a working musician. And once he had saved enough money, he returned to try his luck again. Things were starting to change musically, and on the second go-round, Dave was in the right place at the right time.
By the time I got back to Los Angeles, Urban Cowboy was a huge hit. Of course, I'd been playing rock and roll up to then, but I still had the viola and the violin and would do Devil Went Down to Georgia because that was on rock charts at the times. By then, I could go out, do motel lounges with show bands for X amount of money or stay in town and play country. So that's when I made the switch from rock and roll to country, was in fall of 1980, and then I hooked up with some LA country bands.
Country music in California kept Dave busy for the first half of the 1980s, and he might have stayed there if it weren't for another musician with strong Oklahoma ties. It probably didn't seem like it to him at the time, but this move would prove to be absolutely critical for Dave's career.
I guess it was 85, 86, Pake McIntyre got his RCA deal. So Roger Wills, Reba's bass player, says, hey, Pake's got a deal. Do you want to come back and play with him? And I thought, well, yeah, that'll get me into Nashville. That'll get me in the door. Although I lived in Ada at the time, too, because Pake was based out of Kiowa. So I lived in Ada, and Pake had a pickup truck with a camper shell and a big trailer full of PA gear. And there was 8 of us in that pickup truck with the camper shell. That was fun. So the Pake gig, it was the one where Garth found out who I was, because we played a job at Binks in Stillwater, and Garth was the opening act, and we were the artist act. It was a Friday night there. So we show up to play that night, and the place is just packed. And Garth's in there doing Amarillo by Morning and James Taylor, doing the stuff, that he was doing at the time. And it's, okay band, but Garth sang great. And so we get ready, Pake goes, look at all the crowd boys, we got them. So we get ready to play, and the place kind of empties out. So we did our little set, and Garth stayed and listened. So we get done, we're loading up the trailer, and then Garth comes back, and the place fills back up. So that was my first, introduction to Garth Brooks, was that.
The Pake McIntyre tour lasted less than a year, and before long, Dave felt the Southern California sunshine calling him once again. But the mercurial LA scene had already shed its country music skin, and there was very little in the way of gigs. Frustrated but not beaten, this time Dave pointed his loaded station wagon toward Nashville. It was 1989. Dave was at a real musical crossroads in his life. He had no gigs lined up, but as the old saying goes, fortune favors the bold.
The guy that was Pake's road manager, Rick Crabtree, was then road managing Ricky Van Shelton. And Ricky didn't have fiddle or keyboards and kind of needed it, so Rick Crabtree, Crabber we called him, calls me up and goes, man, I can get you on this gig. I said, okay. Well, come out and audition. So I went out and auditioned. Had a 2-hour audition. Thought, well, I've got this gig, because most auditions are 20 minutes. You do 4 or 5 songs, go next. That wasn't the case. We ran all sorts of stuff and worked on tunes. So I thought, well, yeah, I'm in, I never heard from him. And called him a couple of times. And finally, after about 3 weeks, the guy said, oh, Ricky's not hiring right now. Okay. I'd gone out to the Opry with Roger Wills, who's Alan Jackson's bass player currently, and Reba had just changed bands and gone from her Oklahoma band to a Nashville high-dollar band. So I went out with Roger to see the new band, see Reba's new band, and Blay Reynolds was Reba's old band leader, and he was there, and he was writing with Garth at the time. Matter of fact, wrote That Old Wind. He goes, so you're in town? Yeah, well, give me your number. I'll pass it on. I thought, okay, sure. Leave no stone unturned.
I had ran into Blay Reynolds. He was part of the house band at Henson's in Oklahoma City. Then he started playing for Reba. I told him, I said, I need one guy. I got one spot left, and I need a guy that plays piano and fiddle. He says, I know a guy like that. He's right here in town. He's from Ada, Oklahoma. I said, well, I sure love to meet him. It was Dave Gant.
That was Saturday. Tuesday, Garth calls. I've got a Capitol record deal, and I'm looking for a fiddle keyboard player if you're interested. I said, yeah, I'm interested. So I go down and meet Garth, and he plays me rough mixes of The Dance, Not Counting You, Tomorrow Never Comes, and Much Too Young. I thought, well, this is cool stuff. I can play those parts. That's great stuff, yeah. So that was how I met, and that's how I started with Garth Brooks.
I remember he called me on the phone, and he was just pretty despondent. He said, man, this road stuff is just, we're in station wagons, and one night we're in Iowa, the next night we're in North Carolina. It's just nuts. He said, I'm really thinking about coming back to Ada. He said, I'm thinking about going back to East Central, maybe get a business degree. He says, I've got an audition next week, and this guy has just signed a contract, and he's looking for a guy that'll do keyboard and fiddle. And I said, what's his name? Garth Brooks. And I remember, I had a pencil and paper right there by my phone. I wrote down Garth Brooks.
Once again, Dave's ability to play more than one instrument well proved a difference maker in his career. That and his considerable experience playing all kinds of music in all kinds of places. Looking back, it seems as if all that hard work was in unforeseen preparation for his audition with Garth.
He did a showcase for Capitol, and they said, well, you need a better fiddle player and a keyboard player, and in Garth's mind, that was one guy.
You got one spot, two instruments, and I don't know if you know this, somebody that plays piano and fiddle, they don't exist. They just don't. So the fact that he played piano and fiddle and played them both as great as he did was, to me, just a godsend that this is the guy you're supposed to be with.
Dave was there from the very beginning of Garth's rise. Although their paths had already crossed briefly, and Garth had certainly already played more than his fair share of nightclubs, these two talented musicians came together after Garth landed his first record deal. Call it serendipity, call it kismet, call it fate, call it whatever you want to call it. One thing for sure, Dave hitched his wagon to the right star. It was a career-defining move that validated all those that came before. It wasn't all wine and roses right out of the gate, but by all accounts, it was a good time.
We started out and did some Capitol Records clubs, and in the South there, and we'd show up, and there'd be 10, 12 people. Nobody knew who Garth was or cared. There was almost more security than people in the crowd, but it was a good thing too, because Garth's able to figure out what songs go where, what works, what doesn't work. He basically didn't have any pressure. We could sit there and try this, try that. So he was trying to figure out what was going on, what worked, how to put the show together. And things really didn't start to take off till I believe it was June of that year. We went to Cowboys, which was a big country bar down in Dallas at the time. And we showed up there that night after dinner, went and ate and came back and couldn't park the bus anywhere. Garth's going, well, who's playing here? who's here besides us? What's going on here? And we go into that club, and turns out Much Too Young was a huge anthem in Texas at the time, because it had been out, I don't know, a couple, 3 months or not, but it was huge in Texas. So, man, that was when it started. Right there was when you knew, oh, this is going. Because we did 3 nights, and the place was packed out all 3 nights. And from then on, they started booking us in Texas, so we spent a lot of '89 in Texas playing, because Garth was in such huge demand. There was times we just stayed in Texas, and there was a lot of times I would have my folks would come down to Denison or something and pick me up and bring me back to Ada instead of going back to Nashville.
A lot of people get this idea, oh man, Dave just made it. Well, he put in a good 10 years of just hard work, after he left Ada, before he ever, landed the job with Garth.
Let's take Dave Gant on the road as a young man. He was the old guy of the group, and he was the old guy of the group maybe 30. The rest of us were all 20s, And so we looked up to him, and Dave led. Dave led in great ways. One, we drove a van, okay? Great story. We're driving a van. We're going to Kansas City from the Opry. So we're going to the KC Opry from the Grand Ole Opry. We're driving. Gant's been at the wheel about 2 miles. Start seeing this. Palmer hits me. He goes, look at this. Gant's doing this, right? He wasn't sleepy. He was a veteran. He knew if you thought he was going to go to sleep at the wheel, he'd never have to drive.
Because Dave was the oldest, had the most road experience, had a strong work ethic, and was undeniably a brilliant musician, he fell into the role of Garth's band leader early on. That means making sure the band is all on the same page musically speaking, doing exactly what they are supposed to do in any given moment, allowing Garth to focus on his performance and interact with the fans.
He's been a band leader since day one. And the thing with character is, character comes with you. What I value most in Dave Gant is he won't let it go. Confrontation, that's not his thing. But when Dave gives you, fine. When he gives you that, hands go up and you hear that, fine. You can ask anybody. That means you're wrong, but I'm blue in the face from talking about it. Go back and study, and you'll see I'm right.
Garth calls the shots. I just try to get the band to the point where he can do what he wants to with it. And that's 2 whole different animals, playing on the road and playing in the studio. When I was in LA, I did some sessions, and I could come up with parts and do this and play in good time and all that all day, all time. But once you get out on the road, it's entirely different.
He understands that live is supposed to be loose. Right, but loose. It's going to elevate in tempo a little bit on the choruses so the crowd will come up. And when it comes down, the ballads are going to be played a little slower so they get a little more dramatic. He understands that. Live is so different from studio. And Gant is one of the rare guys who can do both. You stick him in the studio and he's note for note. You stick him live, then all of a sudden that emotion and everything that should come with live, that a lot of studio guys can't get to, Dave Gant gets to.
In terms of country music, the 1990s simply belonged to Garth Brooks. He released smash album after smash album and had an incredible run of hit songs. However, at the dawn of the 21st century, Garth famously retired from the road at the height of his popularity in order to spend more time with his family. He left a huge hole in the country music landscape, and Dave, along with other band members, had to find other things to do.
I've had a good run. You know, I got to do this. I got to play with Garth. I got to do the Grammys twice, Central Park and People's Choice and all these different shows. And I thought, well, and I had little kids at the time too. So I went and got Microsoft and Novell certifications and became a PC land tech for Wells Fargo. So when Garth quit and I got the computer certification, it was like, I want to just see if I can do something else and not have to rely on this to make a living. As time went along, he says, we're going to go back out. We'll go back out one of these days. We're not going out now. I said, well, yeah, it'd be great, you know. So. But it's the music business, and I wasn't going to hold my breath.
So I didn't see Dave for 7 years, 8 years. And the first time I saw him after he retired, Dave Gant looked better than he did when he retired. And what's he doing? Working in computers. David Gant, solid as a rock. So when we announced we were coming out of retirement, the first call you make was David Gant.
We'd go out and do like the Kansas City thing, and he said, 7 more years now, we're going back out in 7 years. Okay, yeah. And then we did Toby Keith's tornado thing, 13, 1 more year, we're going back out. And the closer it got, it's like, yeah, this is going to actually happen, isn't it? You know?
If we get to play 25 more minutes or 25 more years, I hope every day of it was David Gant.
As of September 2014, Garth Brooks is all the way back. Loyal in deed as much as word, he has taken Dave back out on the road. For Dave, it marks 25 years with Garth and a return to what he loves most. To see them perform, it's as if the band hasn't even skipped a beat.
What hit me recently was to be in Atlanta and see Paul McCartney one night and thinking, we're doing the same. Minneapolis, we did 11 shows. That's what amazes me. The fact, Tulsa, nobody's ever, Garth's got the record. He has the record for most of the buildings we play.
I still laugh because, you know, he was an all-state trombone player, classically trained viola player, you know, rock and roll keyboard player. What's he doing in a country band with Garth Brooks? You know, I mean, he can't play country. You know, he tells me a lot of times, you know, well, Garth could have such better keyboard player than me. Well, as far as technician, maybe so, but as far as a musician, knowing, you know, what to put where, no, I don't think so. I think he's got the best.
You always knew Dave had it in him to do, and he just got the opportunity to really show off what he could do, and he's done wonderful things with it, and I think he's loved every minute of it.
Dave Gant was born to do what Dave Gant's doing.
Standing to my right has been the band leader since day one. He does piano, fiddles, background vocals, one of the best guys you'll ever meet from Ada, Oklahoma. Give it up for David Gant!
It's kind of like a three-ring circus, and he's the ringleader, so we all cut up in that goofy up there and have a good time, and Garth's in charge of all of it. I'll play with Garth as long as he has me out there, then I'm done, I guess.
View this program again anytime at www.youtube.com/cityofadaok.